Hey everybody, are you interested in looking at the distilling process and pairing that with key business knowledge such as finance, marketing, and operations? Then you should check out the online Distilled Spirits Business Certificate from the University of Louisville. It's an online program and can be completed in as little as 15 weeks. It's taught by both U of L business faculty and corporate fellows, so you're getting real experience from real experts at the most renowned distilleries, companies, and startups in the distilling industry. And all that's required is a bachelor's degree. Go to business.louisville.edu/online spirits.
You know, you play Little League Baseball and there'd be 3 Corkys on 2 teams, so everybody's name.
It was the new John back then.
Yeah, it really.
Everybody says Corky, everybody looks up.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's episode 216 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm Kenny, and we've got some news to run through. And we've got some exciting news that's coming from Old Forester. Their 1910 Old Fine Whiskey. We talked about it on the show with Jackie Zykin before, and it exceeded the expectations that Old Forester ever would have known about. It was their 4th and final expression of the Old Forester's Whiskey Row series, and it had sold out across the nation. But it's now being announced that it'll be back on shelves at the end of the month. You know, the idea of pairing bourbon and food and even infusing bourbon and food is nothing new, but some might wonder, have we gone too far? Well, the commercialization of bourbon continues as Denny's, you know, that place with moons over Miami, is announcing a new bourbon-themed menu for fall. It's called Big Bourbon Flavors. The menu features a range of bourbon-inspired dishes to enjoy throughout the day. So for breakfast, you've got the apple bourbon pancake breakfast that has 2 flaxseed multigrain pancakes with a caramel apple walnut bourbon sauce. And for lunch and dinner, you've got 2 classic bourbon dishes, the bourbon bacon burger, which is topped with a bourbon sauce. And then you've got the bourbon chicken sizzling skillet, which sees a grilled chicken breast coated in a bourbon glaze. And as with any rare bourbon release, this is a limited time offer, and you can read more about this with a link to vinepair.com in our show notes. What's the sweet spot for bourbon's age? You know, if you follow along with the podcast, you would know after hearing all kinds of master distillers and master blenders that age isn't everything. And heck, we know that when we go on barrel picks. And we have this notion that higher age is better, but there's a reason why you're going to end up seeing barrels of stuff that has been rejected for Elijah Craig 23 that just gets dumped into standard Evan Williams tanks. And there's a new article by winemag.com that interviewed Four Roses master distiller Brent Elliott about that sweet spots. And Brent said that the majority of barrels peak in around the 5 to 10 year range. And in this range is when all the immature character of the white dog is gone and there's a light and bright and delicate balance of the flavors from the grains and the fermentation that have developed in the barrel and with the barrel to create that perfect balance. And beyond the 12-year range is we're going to start seeing fewer and fewer of those actually quote-unquote improving each year. You can read more about bourbon, rum, Scotch, and Armagnac sweet spots, which surprisingly, Armagnac was at 50 years old, with the article from Wine Mag in our show notes. Do you have an old dusty bottle still sitting on the shelf? And more importantly, have you opened it? Well, I guess this kind of goes for any bottle of bourbon that you have open, and you're now wondering, how long do I have to drink this before it goes bad or maybe just changes completely? According to researchers at Cardi, they presented their findings at the annual Tales of the Cocktail Convention in New Orleans. And everyday factors such as temperature fluctuations, light exposure, and oxidation can lead to rapid spirit degradation. And this can pretty severely alter both the color and the flavor of alcohol stored in glass bottles. Bacardi flavor scientists conducted a series of experiments on the effects of temperature fluctuations on its rum and found that temperature changes can degrade an organic molecule called terpene, and this alters the flavor of the alcohol too. By exposing various glass bottles stored to UV radiation, it actually intended to try to simulate the effects of sunlight, and researchers found that over a period of 10 days of exposure, bourbon lost 10% of its color, while Scotch lost 40%. But color is never just color. When it comes to alcohol, color changes are indicative of flavor changes too. And researchers concluded that whiskey has an almost indefinite shelf life if you leave it unopened and stored in a cool space. However, once you open it, the rules of the game start changing. In order to best protect the flavor profile from oxidation, If you have a bottle that is less than half, you should drink it within a year. And if you have less than a quarter of a bottle left, you have about 3 to 4 months before it starts to get questionable. You can read the entire article from bustle.com in our show notes. Are you a Patreon supporter of ours? Well, we had recently launched a new Discord server where everybody can come and chat daily in real time. There's a lot of talk going on about the podcast on a daily basis, and for me, seriously, it's almost hourly because I'm giving updates of what's coming in through email and other kind of news that we necessarily don't always talk about on the podcast, but there's just loads of bourbon talk. So come, connect your Discord account to your Patreon account, and you can join in the fun with us. Now, for today's podcast, we look back and Peerless has just been a fun distillery to watch. When they first launched their 2-year rye at $100 or more across the country, it had some major pushback from whiskey geeks. Until they tried it. It gets better and better every single year. And this whiskey is just one aspect of the story because Corky talks a lot about how they rebuilt this brand. It's just a fantastic story to hear. It's always appealing to hear kind of how someone fights hard to restore history by fighting to get their original DSP. And no expense was spared when it's actually coming to the bottling and really what the end result of their whiskey is. So this is going to be a fun distillery to watch as they grow. And if you didn't know, they just released their first bourbon to the world at 4 years old. All right, now here we go. Let's get in a quick word from Joe over at Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
Hi, Joe from Barrel Bourbon here. We explore whiskey in an entirely new way. My team at Barrel Craft Spirits selects and blends barrels of whiskey into something greater than the sum of their parts. Find out more at barrelbourbon.com.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. I'm going to say this now and repeat it a lot in this episode. Do not market to children if you're an alcohol brand. Now, with that said, we live in this beautiful bourbon lifestyle, and sometimes friends buy friends baby gifts that have bourbon logos in it. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, a good friend brought me a baby bib with a distillery logo on it. It was for my then 7-month-old son, and it was quite cute, and I really appreciated it. It was lovely. My wife laughed about it. Even my son thought it was cute. But I didn't really think anything of it from a marketing perspective because my friend actually made it. This was not created by the distillery. My friend made this special embroidered baby bib. And then I started reviewing some cigarette testimony from the 1990s. That's what I do. I like reading old transcripts and lawsuits to find nuggets of history and factual information. Well, this was a time when the anti-smoker leagues were really dissecting the tobacco industry for having billboards near schools and creating cartoon characters as the mascots for tobacco. Now, the alcohol industry has always done a very good job of avoiding this, marketing to children, and they've really enforced that heavily within the trade. But in recent years, whiskey fans have actually gifted one another bourbon-related things to celebrate newborns and even make, children t-shirts with whiskey logos. For the most part, these are innocent, homemade gifts from one friend to another. When a friend has a kid, the natural instinct is to buy that friend a gift. And if your friend is a bourbon fan, you might be inclined to buy or create a bourbon onesie. We may like it and think it's cute, but the rest of the world could see it as marketing bourbon to a child, which is very bad. You see, we are in this weird place in our society with how we perceive alcohol. Many of us look at bourbon as the great bourbon lifestyle, and our children see our bottles all the time and hear us talking about master distillers. So for this audience, you and I, getting a bourbon baby bib is one of the greatest, most thoughtful gifts you could possibly imagine. But this is potentially a very slippery slope. If the wrong person sees my son wearing that bib, they may think it's from a brand and report it to the federal authorities. It could lead to an investigation and severe consequences in social media circles, which are already cracking down on alcohol and tobacco-related posts. After all, advocacy groups will go to the ends of the earth to protect children, and they absolutely should. Again, do not market to children at all, especially if you are a bourbon-related brand. And nobody wants to market to children in this industry. Nobody. So as we gift to our friends in celebration of their children, just be cognizant of what it might look like to an outsider. And while bourbon is a long way from Joe Camel, we don't want to portray our lifestyle in the wrong light. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, did you know I have a second edition of my book Bourbon Curious coming out soon? You can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Search Bourbon Curious. Again, that's Bourbon Curious. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Pursuit, and here we are the second time at Down One Bourbon Bar doing our live streaming podcast. So happy Monday to everybody that's out there. Hopefully we're starting to shake things up to start the beginning of the week because not a lot of news kind of happens on Mondays. So.
Yeah, especially after spring break. Everybody's
the lull.
Everybody's having a case of the Mondays today. It's like I don't want to do anything.
But everybody comes back looking super tan though.
Well, I know. Yeah. Not me. I still got white farmer's tan. You don't tan, do you, Corky?
I do if I'm in the sun. I need to be there more.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is our room now. The Kenny and Ryan, this is our studio. So
it is. It's slowly turning into that. We got the phones are going off the hook if anybody can hear them. So it's good.
We got a telethon going.
Yeah. So
calling for your support.
Yeah. 188 Bourbon. We'll take your questions live. Actually, that's not a real number. Please don't call.
Yep.
But today is going to be a pretty fun and interesting episode because we are sitting here with Corky Taylor. Corky is the chairperson, CEO as well of Peerless Distilling Company. This is something that, honestly for us, it had taken a while for Peerless to kind of get on the map for us, even though it was kind of in our backyard. We all the time, we have people that say, oh, we want to get on the podcast, but they don't really hit a national awareness. And I think it's time now that Peerless has started to break that ground, and they are starting to kind of venture out in the way and make themselves a nationally recognized brand at this point.
Yeah, and internationally as well. I was just talking to Cordell, my good friend Cardi, before the show, and he was telling me that how Peerless is now in 45 states, and it just won I think the British Craft Producer of the Year in globally. So I mean, that's pretty big stuff, coming out of Peerless. So I'm super excited. Me and Kenny, actually, Corky probably don't remember, we came there last year for my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
We had a group of 10, and you gave a great tour.
It was actually a Pursuit Undercover Volume 1.
Yep. Exactly. We were behind the scenes. I brought my own whiskey thief, and it was a lot of fun. It's a very cool place if no one's been to it, but excited to revisit the story and share with our audience, Corky's background and the whole Peerless brand and what they're doing to make their name in the whiskey game.
Absolutely. So I guess we should probably introduce our guest. So today we do have Corky. He is the chairman and the CEO of Peerless Distilling Company. So Corky, aloha, right?
Because, there you go.
That was one thing that I learned from you at the last Legend series is that you grew up in Hawaii.
I did. My father was in the military, so I spent the first 8.5, 9 years growing up in Hawaii. My dad was stationed over there, so actually at one time lived right on Waikiki Beach. So surfed on Waikiki Beach, and then we moved to Schofield and Shafter. And then when I was older, I surfed.
Was that a huge letdown?
You can go from Hawaii.
Because I went straight from Hawaii to military school down in Lebanon, Tennessee. So that was a major letdown.
Yeah.
But no, I used to surf the North Shore, Sunset Beach, where the big, I wasn't surfing the 25-foot waves, but I was still surfing the 10-foot waves. So, But then our family moved back to my dad's hometown of Henderson, Kentucky.
Well, what? Give us a time frame of that. Like when you were growing up in Hawaii, like what age range was this?
I was about 5 years old when we moved to Hawaii. My brother was actually born in Hawaii on Maui. Then we moved back when I was 13 years old to Henderson. So 13, 14, right in there.
Was he given, when your brother was born, was he given like an official like Hawaiian name that you didn't get because you were kind of an immigrant?
He was actually named after my great-grandfather.
Corky's not Hawaiian? Polynesian? That sounds Polynesian to me. Here we go.
Yeah, no, he was named after actually my great-grandfather that started Peerless. So he was Henry. We called him Hank, but he was Henry, named after my great-grandfather. So,
well, kind of talk about your name a little bit too. So Corky Taylor, and this is the name Corky because it is a little bit different, right? So kind of how did this name evolve, or where does it come from? And I'm going to just guess it's not your actual given name, or
no,
is it?
it's not.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
No, I'm Roy M. Taylor III. Of course, my grandfather was, always Roy. My dad was Roy too, and then General Patton named my father Ace, so he went by Ace the whole time I was with him. And then since they didn't really want to call me Roy, so I got the name Corky day one. So the only time I was ever named Roy was first day of school. So they'd say Roy Taylor, and I'd kind of raise my hand up, no, it's Corky. So that was, I could go another year by Corky. So I've always gone by Corky.
It's not too bad.
It was a military name. I mean, there was a lot of Corkys. Something about it, I don't know, but I played.
Did you get to earn it, that name, or?
No, not really. No. So it was, you play Little League Baseball, and there'd be 3 Corkys on 2 teams, so everybody's name.
It was the new John back then.
Yeah, it really.
Everybody says Corky. Everybody looks up.
Yeah.
Well, good. So I kind of want to kick it off and start talking a little bit about the story and the history of Peerless. So before we talk about the whiskey and the bourbon that you're producing now, kind of give the story of your family and how this really evolved.
Okay, how it evolved was obviously through my great-grandfather. He was born in Poland. He was a Polish Jew. He moved to New York City to Manhattan when he was 5 years old. He was selling papers on the corner when he was 7, 8, 10, 12 years old. And when he saved up some money when he was 19, he said, I'm going to get on a riverboat, and when I run out of money, that's where I'm going to get off. Why he didn't get off in Louisville, Kentucky, I have no idea. He got off in Henderson, which was a good thing. Walked up the top of the hill, had 0 money, and he asked the bar up there called Puckett's, can I sweep the floor and can I live in the attic until I get myself squared away? And about 2 years later, he ended up buying the bar. But what he really wanted to be was a banker, and that's what he was. He went from Henderson to St. Louis for a short period of time because there was a lot of Jewish people from St. Louis, so they kind of took him under his wing. He became a banker and moved back to Henderson, opened First National Bank. In 1889, he bought a small distillery from the Worsham family. Mr. Worsham had passed away. He bought the distillery. They were making about 8 barrels of bourbon a day, and within 2 years, he had some weeks he was making 200 barrels a week. So he took it to a pretty good. At one time, there were 220 distilleries in the state of Kentucky. He was probably in the top 5 or 10 during that era.
Do you think he looked at it as a purely investment, or was it like something they enjoyed?
No, I think he looked at it as an investment.
Yeah.
I think he was pretty money-driven. He built one of the largest breweries of south of Mississippi, the Henderson Brewing Company, and the way he distributed his beer during that era was all by riverboat. So he had his own riverboats and went to Cincinnati, to Louisville, down to St. Louis, and he built that into a pretty good-sized brewery. But his love was Chicago. That's where all his buddies were. You couldn't do this today, but back then he sat on the board of 5 different banks up in Chicago, but he owned the Palmer House up in Chicago. It's probably one of the most famous, some people have never heard of it, but it's the longest running hotel in the United States. First hotel to have a light bulb, telephone, elevator, dishwasher, and air conditioning.
No iPhone? Not the first iPhone?
No iPhone. iPhone's next to the beds.
No, I think that's, but they invented the brownie, so that's what they were famous for.
Okay.
So.
I like brownies.
Yeah.
We can do that. So I guess kind of help me through the timetable here. Now, was your great or great grandfather?
Great grandfather.
Okay, so was this lost during Prohibition or like?
It was.
Okay, so kind of talk about like how that sort of.
He had it up till Prohibition, and he had about 63,000 barrels of bourbon he had to get rid of. He was hiding, if you can hide 50,000 of them in Owensboro, because they had huge warehouses. There's some big distilleries in Owensboro, and they had big fences with ivy on them. So he was able to hide a lot of barrels. And it took him about 3 years to get licenses to distribute alcohol during Prohibition. So
nobody was coming there day one trying to bring out the hammers. Yeah. And
I think they probably were. I mean, the distillery in Henderson was pretty wide open, and that's the reason why he would sneak at night over on 17 train cars to Owensboro to keep barrels over there and keep them hidden. So the government, you're right, would have gone in there with axes, cracked them open, poured them out. So he thought that he could get a license eventually, and it took him about 3 years to do so. So then he got a license and was able to distribute where he distributed a lot of his alcohol, and we found this out. Rocky Wirtz up in Chicago, it's Wirtz Distributing. Now it's Breakthrough, but they were I guess he knew about my great grandfather, and before I got up there, he told us that my great grandfather sold the Walgreens. Everybody's familiar with Walgreens, got one on every corner, right? But he sold them a little less than 40,000 barrels of bourbon during Prohibition, which was a big deal back then. So they partied pretty hard in the Palmer House for years. This wasn't one of these 2-week parties. This went on for like 10 or 12 years during Prohibition, but he was able to get rid of all his. Then he shut the distillery down. He shut it down before that.
So it was more like a liquidation sort of thing is what he was trying to get out of it.
Yeah, he'd already sold his stills. In 1917, Prohibition came along in 1919, so he must have known something was coming on. So in 1917, he sold his stills to United Distillery up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And what he did, he hired Mr. Sherman here in town that owns Vendome. They're the largest still builder in the United States, probably the world. Hired Mr. Sherman, brought his family to Henderson, his wife and 4 kids, stayed there 8 months, broke them down, went up to Vancouver, about a month on the train, set them up, spent 8 months up there, came back here, and that's where they got some of the money to continue and to build Vendome with. So I went in there 98 years later, and they told me it was your great-grandfather that helped put our great-grandfather in business.
So they were like, well, you need a still, so we're going to go ahead and just bump you up near towards the front of the line. This is your repayment.
That wasn't really it. No.
So talk about the idea now. The family legacy of distilling and having your own whiskey had been lost for a few generations, and now you were at the point of just saying like, screw it, like let's start making whiskey again. Like what was that real determining factor that wanted you to start pushing towards that?
Because he had a legitimate story.
Yeah,
most people are like, my great-grandpappy, and you're like, you're not even related to them.
Yeah, well,
it's not even close.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, I had a big company, and I had a financial services company. I sold it to a group out of New York, 50th floor, Rockefeller Center. I walked on the beach in Sarasota, Florida for a year and a half, most depressed I've ever been in my life. I said, I've got to go back to work. So I came back. I had a home here in Louisville, and my youngest son, Carson, was a builder, and I said, let's do something. I don't care what we do, let's do something. So we had a lot of history with my great-grandfather and my grandfather running the distillery. So we said, let's build a distillery. We went down to Vendome and walked through the door and said, we want to order a still, and started looking for buildings here in town. And Carson was a builder, so we found this building down on 10th Street that kind of lent itself to do what we wanted to do, and ordered the stills, and he started the building. Took us almost 2 years to the day to build the building, or to convert the building to a distillery. And
why'd you choose that building and that location?
Well, I just felt like that if I got the building, and maybe when our bourbon came out in 6 to 7 years, part of Louisville would be heading that direction. It was pretty much gone. New Lou is great, but there's not many places left in that end of town. So I thought in 6, 7, 8 years, Louisville would be heading that direction. So it was in kind of a rough area then. It's starting to get better as we go along, and when we get the park built down on the river, it'll be better yet. But I just thought it would work out, and it had a loading dock. It was about the right size we wanted, so it's worked out. I think it's worked out very well for us.
Why not? Oh, sorry.
No, I was about to say. I mean, do you see that as more of like Louisville's having a renaissance period? Because you had a choice. You could have gone to Bardstown. You could have gone back to your hometown.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Why not
Shelbyville?
Why not Owensboro? Because OZ Tyler's making a great name for themselves.
Sure, they
up
are.
There.
Yeah. Well, Henderson's my hometown. I mean, that's, I feel like that's where everything started in Henderson. But I felt like that. I like Louisville. I knew Louisville was coming along with the bourbon renaissance, with bourbonism and what was going on, and that was even being talked about 4 or 5 years ago. So I felt like, with Brown Foreman being here, and just a lot of things going on in downtown Louisville, I just felt like that I'd go ahead and take the chance, and in 5, 6, 7 years it would kind of head our direction. I'm not too far off. I mean, a lot of it has to do with luck. You know, you have to have a lot of luck doing it. But as luck would have it, I think that we're in the right place at the right time. And we made a decision that we're making our own product. I don't source anything at all. So I knew our bourbon's not even out. It won't be out till June 22nd. So we're actually, waiting a little bit over 4 years for it to come out. I'm holding off. I could bring it out today if I wanted to, but I'm bringing it out on my dad's birthday. That's the only generation we skipped. We skipped the third generation. I'm the fourth. Obviously, Carson's the fifth. So in honor of my father, I'm bringing it out on his birthday.
Oh, very cool. So, I mean, back to the Louisville thing, I'm assuming that you're going to pay a little bit more money up front to actually sit here and have your home base and being headquartered in Louisville than trying to go and, be in Owensboro or be in Bardstown or something like that. Did you look at this and saying, this is where the population is going to grow. This is where the tourism is going to expand. We don't have to convince people to come. Like, we're already just like another dot on the map of the Louisville bourbon kind of experience, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, with the convention center right here, I mean, you know what's going on here with the farm machinery shows. The big shows are here in Louisville. The convention center, at that time, I didn't know it was going to be torn down and start all over, but that's okay. We got through that 2 years, so did everybody else. But during that era, they were building like an unbelievable amount of hotels in this town. I think when I started, they were building like 10 hotels. And then it come another couple of years, and then there's 20 new hotels. So those people are going to do something. They're going to go places. And I wanted to be in Louisville so people could come in and take a tour of our distillery and know the family, the history, because I really believe we have about as much history in the bourbon industry as any distillery in the whole state of Kentucky. And it might be saying a mouthful, but I mean, when you go back,
Fred No's going to have a response to that one.
Who's that?
Fred No
or any of the beams.
Well, Jim Beam is DSP number 230. We're number 50. So
I want you to also tell that story too, because I know that you also fought to have your original DSP back as well.
Oh, fought! That isn't the word for it. I spent a year and a half getting that number back. I mean, we started from my great-grandfather. I can't tell you how many attorneys in this town I went through and what we had to do to get that, but I was bound and determined that we had DSP number 50. It took us a year and a half to get, almost to the day, a year and a half to get that number. First time in history the government's ever gone back to give a DSP number back to a family. So we were able to get it, and I called the fella when we got it, and I said, okay, what would my number have been if I'd just filled the paperwork out the way you wanted me to? 20,232. I said 50 looks better up on the building.
That's hard to market that.
So,
and they're like, I have all this history, but we're DSP 20,000. We're like, yeah, right. Good call.
So the new numbers are in the 22,000s.
Yeah.
And there's a number of them in this town that are 22,000. So, but no, I mean, when you mentioned Jim Beam, they're 230, we're 50. When you mentioned Buffalo, they're 113. Wild Turkey's 139. Makers is 444. I know them all. So number 50 is a big deal. It's not such a big deal sometimes in the United States when we do tours down there. Okay, we're number 50, but you bring somebody in there from Japan, you bring them in from Scotland, from Ireland, and they see number 50, their eyes light up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, you have got to have a lot of history with your family to have DSP number 50.
When you're going through that process, at any point were you just like, this is too much? Because we've dealt with TTB, we've dealt with the laws, we've gone through, and I don't even know if they know all the laws and all the restrictions. So at some point, did you ever think like, let's just give it up? It's gonna take way too long to get this 50 back.
I did, but you have to keep in mind we were going through the construction era that time. We started, and it took exactly 2 years to go through it. So I started that process even before we started. When we first bought the building, then we had to get we had to get permits, that takes time to do. So I was working on 50 from day one. So I just felt like that I'd finally get it. So, and we
Perseverance.
yeah. So I never really, you know, I just thought I'd get it.
So you're a financial guy. So like when you're looking at starting a distillery and the investment it takes and the return on investment and were you like, this is like, what was your mindset going into this? Like, I know you wanted to bring your family's history back and like do all that, but talk about pulling those triggers. Like, even though your brain's probably like, this doesn't make much sense. Like,
no, it you know, when I first, we weren't going to be, and we're not that big today. We're a small distillery, but when Carson and I got into that, we were thinking along the lines of a smaller, about half the size we are. But then I guess my financial background kicked in, and I started figuring, you know, I've got to do X amount to make this many barrels, to make this many bottles, to be in this many states. This is what we need to be. And then we wanted to make it where we had complete control of what we were doing. So my mindset was, we've got to make it a certain size. We have to make it this way. And I think we had it down to a pretty good science. People ask me, well, were you aware of the construction costs? Well, Carson having a financial background or a business background on building, I pretty much knew what it was going to cost us to build. And, you know, putting barrels away, you know, we've waited. I mean, we waited for our rye whiskey to come out in a little over 2 years, and now we're waiting over 4 years for our bourbon. So people don't do that. You know, they go and they source it, they put it in a bottle. This is my product, you know, same old game everybody plays, but I just couldn't do it. I had to do what I wanted to do and keep it and make it, keep it and hold it and put it out when it's ready to go.
Why was that so important to you?
Because I'm building a distillery to stay. I'm not building this distillery to sell. We're building it as a family. We're building it for people who work with us, and we call them family. So, you know, I'm the fourth generation. Carson's the fifth. He's got boys that'll be the sixth. They don't do that anymore. You all know all the distilleries in the state of Kentucky. You know, so there's only one or two owned by the family. Everybody else is owned by this one, that one. Mm-hmm. We can go all over the world and talk about that. But I think in order to have respect from the big distilleries, what I call the big seven, and to have the respect from other distilleries around the United States, I had to do it my way. And that's make my own product. When it's ready, it's ready. And as luck would have it, that's kind of what's happening to us.
So talk about so you say you want to do it your way and your own product. How did you define that or come up with, like, this is my set of, these are my standards, this is my ethos?
And don't give us some like, oh, we source all our corn from, 50 miles away, because that's everybody else's story. I think there's got to be something new here.
What it makes, when you look at a bottle of Peerless, what do you tell people to see in that bottle? Like, what's in it?
Well,
not just whiskey. I know it's whiskey, but
it's just good whiskey.
We understand. Everybody makes it the same. Run through the same stills. They put it in a barrel. They pull it off the still at 160. They put it in a barrel at 125. They water it down. They put it in a bottle at 92 proof. That wasn't. We wanted to have complete control over everything that we did. And in order to do that, we had to have the right computer systems, which we did all our own software. We had to have the right grain operation. We had to find out what would make it the best product. It was in 1964. It changed from going in the barrel at 110 proof to 125 proof. So they did that for cost. But going in the barrel at 110 proof actually makes a better product. So I put it in the barrel at 107 proof because it might creep up a little bit. And then I take it straight from the barrel right to the bottle. We don't add one drop of water to it when you take it from the barrel, once it's aged, to the bottle. So the bottles that you see right here are probably 108, 108.1, 108.2. We wanted to give it the best flavor profiles we could possibly give it. The other main reason why I think that we're making as good a product as we are is we're sweet mash. Everybody's familiar with sour mash. You hold the mash back, you pull it forward, that isn't the way. We're a military family. I want this place clean. The joke is I want it battleship clean. I want that place spotless. When we make a product, we steam clean, we clean everything. You won't see a hose on the ground. You won't see a pressure gauge spewing. You won't see any of that. Everything we have is controlled. We could cook exactly at a certain temperature. We ferment exactly at a certain temperature. Everything is controlled. And I think that's the reason why we've received the accolades that we have since we started. And we're going to continue. We're not going to be cocky enough to think that we're doing it exactly right. We're doing it better every day. Everything we do, we're going to buy better equipment, better systems to make sure that we're on top.
What kind of those better systems are you investing in today?
Well, we have a continuous still, but there's there's just ways to make that still run better, run hotter, run faster. So basically pumps and gauges and things like that we have just exactly complete control over. So, we don't make a lot of product. We only make 10, 12 barrels a day. That's probably all we're ever going to make. I don't have any aspirations of building a distillery that's going to be line up to Jim Beam or Maker's Mark and making 1,000 barrels a day. We're going to make, we might make 12, 15, 16, 18 barrels a day someday, but not today. Mm-hmm. So we just want to have control. If you can have control if you're the size distillery we are today. When you get way up there, you're just making product. And don't miss on all bourbon coming out of Kentucky is a good product. We just want to have the best.
Do you think the decision to, like you said, stay small, like really focus on quality, do you think you would have made that same decision younger in your life if you were like start the distillery like younger and like, oh, we got to, make this as big and fast and best as possible instead
turn and burn.
Whereas this is more like of a passion project. I'm sure it's giving you returns, but it seems like more like, this is really...
if I'd have stayed down in Henderson, where all my buddies are and where some of the big buildings are, and maybe I would have had aspirations of building a bigger distillery and coming out of my great-grandfather's buildings or done something. But, coming into Louisville, Kentucky and wanting to do it in the city where I could benefit from people taking tours and visiting us, I think, and the timing on bourbon's only been hot for the last probably 8-10 years. I mean, you go back 20 years, everything was vodka. Yeah. Gin was way before that. So vodka was so hot, all the flavored vodkas. Bourbon really hasn't been that strong for the last, I'd say, 10 years. So
I know.
it's just
I'm from Bardstown. No one cared about it.
Yeah, well,
now they care about it.
Yeah, but they make great stuff in Bardstown.
Yeah.
So I think that, I talk to all the big guys, and they say that the bourbon industry will be good for the next 14 to 20 years. So that's good to hear because every business has a cycle. Mm-hmm. My father had a Ford dealership, and every 5 years you knew it was going to go down. It was going to come back. So at least bourbon industry, I think, will be good for the next 15, 20 years.
Why do they think that?
The 2019 Kentucky's Edge Bourbon Conference and Festival pairs all things Kentucky with bourbon. It takes place October 4th and 5th at venues throughout Covington and Newport, Kentucky. Kentucky's Edge features a bourbon conference, music, tastings, pairings, tours, and an artisan market. Kentucky's Edge 2019 is where bourbon begins. Tickets and information can be found online at kentuckysedge.com. If you're making plans to visit the Bourbon Trail, the one thing you're thinking about is, how do I get around to all these distilleries? We recently used Central Kentucky Tours for a barrel pick, and the hospitality and information was top-notch. Heck, even Ryan learned a few new things about Bardstown. Central Kentucky Tours offers public and private tours for groups from 2 to 55, with pickups in Harrodsburg, Lexington, Louisville, and everywhere in between. So book your time with them today at centralkentuckytours.com. There are more craft distilleries popping up around the country now more than ever before. So how do you find out the best stories and the best flavors? Raghouse Whiskey Club is a Whiskey of the Month club, and they're on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Along with 2 bottles of hard-to-find whiskey, Rack House's boxes are full of cool merchandise that they ship out every 2 months to members in 40 states. In Rack House's June box, they're featuring a distillery that claims to be the first distillery to stout a whiskey. Rack House Whiskey Club is shipping out 2 bottles from there, including its Beer Barrel Bourbon and Beer Barrel Rye, both of which were finished in barrels that were once used to mature America's #1 selling bourbon barrel-aged stout. And if you're a beer guy like me, you would know that's New Holland's Dragon Milk. Go to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com to check it out and try a bottle of Beer Barrel Bourbon and Beer Barrel Rye. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box.
So at least bourbon industry, I think, will be good for the next 15, 20 years.
Why do they think that?
Well, I think it's a lot of reasons. I think they feel like that it is because it's getting to be a worldwide drink. I mean, the Japanese love it. Even in the UK they like it. Australia likes it. Canada's drinking our product. So, but the main reason is I think women like the flavor of bourbon. They like it. They're getting away from vodka, and then I think you've got the mixologists in all the big cities are getting back to mixing the drinks. The Manhattans, are made with, they were made originally with rye whiskey. Now they're coming back and making it with rye, so that helps us in the big cities of New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA. So I think there's a lot of reasons, but I'd say number one would be that women like bourbon. They like the flavor of it, and hopefully it'll be a good thing. It's #1 drink in the world today.
Well, let's keep it #1.
Yeah.
Well, if it's up to me, obviously we do our part.
Yeah, keep rye whiskey, keep it going great. So the other kind of question I want to kind of talk about is the bottling and as well as the price point, right? Because this is something that most consumers out there, if they've never heard of it, they might see it on the shelf and they're going to be like, "Whoa, that's really up there for a 2-3-year-old product." So kind of talk about the cost of the bottle that goes into it, because I know that you put a considerable amount of effort that goes into the shape, the topper, and everything like that, and how that kind of falls into the ending retail price as well.
Yeah, it's probably the craziest thing I've ever done, but I'll explain it to you.
We're here for the crazy stories.
Carson and Chris Edwards they designed the bottle. We wanted to have what we thought was one of the best bottles made in the United States. And again, I wanted this bottle to be made in the United States. We found a company down in right outside of Atlanta. They only make perfume bottles. They make our bottle. When you pick it upside down, it says Made in the USA. So we wanted to have the right bottle. The cap actually costs more than the bottle. So we wanted to have the heaviest cap, the heaviest bottle, one that has a design on it, and then the label. We actually won on December 5th, Repeal Day in New York City. They have a contest. Who has the best bottle, who has the best label, and who has the best cap in the United States. And last year we won all 3. It's never happened before. So we feel like we have the right, and then to put the product in there, to put a 2-year-old product in there and retail it out for $119 or $120 was a push. But we don't make much product. We felt like it was a good product. Evidently, Whiskey Advocate thought it was a pretty good product too, because we were ranked the 15th best whiskey in the world with a 2-year-old product, but the #1 rye whiskey in the world. On April the 18th of 18, we're ranked the #1 rye whiskey in the world. Jack Daniel's rye came in second, Whistle Pig came in third. So it was a big gamble on our part. We'd have won the accolades. January the 30th, James and I went to New York City, and Whiskey Magazine gave us the award for the #1 craft distillery in the United States out of 900. Caleb Kilburn, our master distiller, just got back from London March. He went there March 28th. We won the #1 craft distillery in the world. So we must be doing something right. We are but now we do have different price points. So a lot of our rye will be more in the $89. Our bourbon will come out about $69. It's still a high end, but we don't make much.
Well, oddly enough, I don't know if people know that rye whiskey actually is more expensive to mash and to create than it is to actually make a bourbon whiskey. So kind of talk about...
Comes up the tanks, got to clean all that funk.
Yeah, it does. Anyway, and rye is, it's 13 $13-14 a bushel, and corn's $3.68. So, it just costs a lot more money to make.
Yeah.
But why is it that rye seems to age a lot quicker and have a better approachable taste to it at a younger age than, say, a bourbon does? What really think you accounts for that?
That's probably a question more for Caleb than it is for me. I don't know why it ages that much faster, but it's twice as fast. I mean, so to have
it's fine.
we're going to have
drinks.
we have a 3-year-old out. We're going to have a 4-year-old out probably in the next 3 or 4 months. So on a go-forward basis, we won't be a 2-year-old rye. All of our rye will be at 4 to 7 years old, and then we'll come out with a Henry Craver 8-year-old. So it'll be hitting on a 4-year-old here probably in the next 3 or 4 months. So we'll be strictly over 4 to 5-year-old rye.
What's this Henry Craver thing you just brought up? That kind of piqued my interest there. Talk about that.
Well, we're going to, in honor of my great-grandfather, we're holding about 20% of what we make for a Henry Craver bourbon. So we'll always have the Peerless product out, but we're going to have a Henry Craver 8-year-old product and probably an 8-year-old rye whiskey as well. We'll hold a little bit for him for an 8-year-old rye. So it's more in honor of my great-grandfather. It's all about our family, our heritage, what we're trying to accomplish here as a family. But I think our 8-year-old bourbon should do well for us.
Yeah, because that was always one of the things that I remember. I remember when the 2-year-old rye first came out, and it came out with a $100 price tag, and I know people were talking, they're like, "Oh man, like how can they do $100 on a 2-year rye whiskey?" And I think one of the big things that was the question that always came up was, well, when the rye is 3 years, and it's 4 years, and it's 5 years, so on and so on, like, is the price gonna keep going up? Is it gonna go down? Is it gonna stay the same? Like, what's the long-term game there?
Well, I'll tell you what the short-term game was before I get on the long.
We'll take the short term.
Okay, let's go the short term. The short term, if I'd have asked $39.95 a bottle, I'd have just been everybody else. I'd have been Jim Beam, Maker's Mark. We'd have just been, we'd gotten lost in the shuffle. So in order to get everybody's attention, which I think we did, we're getting $129, which everybody went, holy cow, I've got to try that.
Yeah.
My God, I mean, $129 for a 2-year-old bottle? Let's try it. And it just so happened it tastes good. Mm-hmm. So was it a gamble? You damn right it was a gamble, by God. But, as it turns out, the way that it's come down the pike, we do realize we've got to get to a 4-year-old. Then you don't have to put an age statement on the bottle once it's 4 years old. So it'll be 5, 6 years old, and I think it'll get better every year. Our 3-year-old is better than the 2-year-old, but it's hard to say. I mean, if you're number one in the world at a 2-year-old, what the hell?
Where do you go from there?
How much?
Close up shop. Let's start off something new.
We're done.
But no, we know. We want to make things better all the time. We want to do a better job. We want to be proud of the product we put out, and we want to be more cost effective. It was a big deal to come out over $100 with a 2-year-old, but it got people's attention. We would have never, ever gotten the accolades that we got if we hadn't asked $129 for that bottle.
Who is the biggest advocate, and then the person that was against it, within inside of the family or inside of the company that was like, all right, this is the price point we're going with, and then somebody was like, I don't know about that, or you just kind of headstrong with it, saying we got to do this?
I think everybody pretty much agreed. I mean that we don't make much product. I'll make it real simple. We go where the money is. The money's in New York City. The money's in Chicago. The money's in San Francisco, L.A., Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Miami, so London. So if you only make 10, 12 barrels of bourbon a day,
you don't take it to Henderson.
You don't take it to Henderson County.
we got it in Henderson, but only about 3 places.
Exactly.
We're not going to go down to Bardstown and put it in the bar down at Bardstown,
Oh,
so,
they'll bitch they can't even pay for a $40 bottle.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have the history that we have, and we go to the places where the money is, and they like it, they have to like it, then we're taking a gamble. But knock on wood, it's going to work.
No, absolutely. And I think it seemed to work so far. The doors are open. The money's still coming in. You got product in, what did you say, 48? How many states?
45 states.
45 states across the country. And so that was kind of like one of the big reasons we kind of want to talk to you is because, you're starting to get this national presence around you. And I kind of want to also talk about, like, so what are the difference in the two bottles we have in front of us today? You have the 2-year small batch and you have a 3-year single barrel. Is that what it is?
Exactly. And it's a 3-year single barrel. And I don't know. Of course, all the distilleries have a reputation of selling single barrels, but for the size that we are, I think it's kind of hit pretty good for us to where we are selling quite a few single barrels. I mean, last year, I think we sold over 50, which was big for us. And this year, we anticipating selling well over 100. And for a small distillery, that's a good thing, and that's how it helps marketing when you're.
Yeah, it's almost like a month. It's almost like a month worth of inventory at this point.
Yeah, well, yeah, but so you get in some of the big bars and you get in some of the big liquor stores in the country, and they've got 30 cases of your product in the center aisle. They see it, and so it's going to help us with that as well.
What's the mash bill on these rye whiskeys?
We don't. I can't tell you.
That's why it's so good. That's the secret.
That's why everybody asks that, and we don't disclose.
Why do you do that?
Because everybody else discloses theirs. We're not going to disclose ours. How do you like it?
I love it. I mean, it's great for 2 year or this is a 2 or 3.
That's the 2 year small batch.
No, they're both 3. Okay, cool. This is the older
both
brother.
3, yeah.
All right. Well, they're both 3.
No, I mean,
both great.
I mean, to me, it tastes like a Kentucky rye, like more of a lower rye, like a closer to 51% rye. But I'm not gonna prod you to give it to me.
Give us drink the rest of it, and I'll get you some of this 3.
No, but I will say, on a little bit about what you said about the mash bill. No matter where we go in the country, they basically call it a bourbon drinker's rye whiskey.
Yeah.
So we do have enough corn in there that it gives it a little bit sweeter taste, and I don't think you quite get that burn that you would with a different rye. And then we have the 3 different profiles. We only blend 6 barrels. 3 different.
I was about to ask that.
profiles.
What's a small batch in your definition?
6 barrels.
Yeah.
So we try to take 3 different flavor profiles. Fruits and florals, caramel and vanilla, and then obviously the oak and pepper is the original rye. So if we blend those and we do it, we pick our barrels. So if we can continue doing that, if it's not ready, it's not ready. We put it back for another 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. So we want to make sure that the barrels that we put out, again being small, we can do that. Obviously, we're not going to blend 500 like the big ones do it. And the other thing that's really important to try to stay what we feel like will be a quality product is all of our rick houses are just going to be 1 floor, 5 high. So the temperature from the top to the bottom is about 4 degrees. You go in these big warehouses, could be 40 degrees temperature from the top floor to the bottom floor. So we like the idea, 1 floor, more control, better product. So the things that we do on a continuous basis, we hope will be a better product for us.
So when you're developing, Corky's thing your own way, whose recipes are these, or like was it just trial and error, or like we're leaning on someone else to like figure it out, or?
You got it, trial and error.
Yeah.
We spent a year.
That's the fun part of research.
We knew, kind of what we wanted to do with the flavor profiles. We had a pretty good idea with some other products close to what with their mash bill. So we just came up with a mash bill that had enough corn in it that people would still think it's a good quality bourbon. And a lot of people that drink this still think it's bourbon.
It doesn't taste. I mean, you can taste the rye, but it's very close. Like you said, it's a bourbon drinker's bourbon. It's like or not a bourbon drinker's bourbon. Bourbon drinker's rye.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So talk about like what are some of your favorite products that kind of like made you determine that this is what I like? You know, some similar, or there's similar products out there that were like, this is kind of where I'm pulling
Whistle Pig.
Whistle
is,
Pig.
You know, when we looked at it, we knew who our competition was going to be, and it seems like since we came out, Whistle Pig, no matter where you go, is going to be our competition. So, you know, but theirs is 8, 10, 12, 14 years.
Right.
So, and you know, so we had pretty good idea that that's our competition, but we wanted to make it our flavor profiles. So we couldn't sit around and wait 14 years. You know? So we had to figure out what we could do. And Caleb Kilburn is our master distiller. He's been with us since day one, and he does a great job for us. But we got Chris and Tommy in there and Carson, so we're kind of all on it, trying to figure out, you know, what we can do to make it better, and obviously going from the 2-year to the 3 years better, and when you come out with a 4-year, it's going to be better, and 5-year, and then kind of hold it about there. I don't think rye needs to be. Whistle Pig does a great job. They've got a great product, but we're not going to be up there at 12, 14 years.
Yeah.
We're just not.
Well, who knows? Of that 20% you're holding back, save another 2%, and then you'll find out later on.
Save it for 8 years.
Yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah.
trying to get that money.
That's gonna be tough.
Sell.
So
No.
the other part about the flavoring aspect, or not flavoring, but you know how you embody and invoke the flavor of the whiskey is all done a lot through the barrel itself.
It is.
And who are you teaming up with to get your barrels, or is this another I'm not going to tell you?
No. It's we strictly do business with Kelvin Cooperage. We like the quality of their barrels that they make. Personally, we like them. They've become good friends of ours. When we got in this business, barrels were hard to come by. There was a barrel shortage. So we went to some of the big barrel places, and they'd say, well, you know, we can help you with 400 or 500 barrels, but we can't give you 1,200, or we can do this, or, you know, and we went to Kelvin and talked to them, and they said, we'll take care of you, and I'll be with Kelvin Cooperage as long as they're, I'll always be with them. Mm-hmm. I won't leave.
I won't leave. It's amazing how rich these barrels are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
For the 3-year-old product.
I mean,
absolutely.
it's crazy. I mean, talk about how did you get hooked up with Caleb, and why did you choose him to be your master distiller?
Well, there's Flavor Man. The Epicenter has a school that it only lasts about 6 days, but it helps you, gives you an idea how to become a distiller or to build a distillery. Caleb went through the school. My son Carson went through the first class. I think Caleb was in the second. I sent Mike. So we've had a number of them go through the school. And then they said, somebody said, you ought to take a look at this young man. He's still a junior in college. So he came over and talked to me. He said, I'd like to, work with you. And this is even before we laid out the distillery. And I said, sure, once you start shoveling gravel over there, and oh, by the way, I got a bunch of nails in this wood, pull nails. And he did that for the first summer he was there. Second summer, I think he shoveled gravel and helped us pour concrete. So, and then he was able to lay out the distillery the way he wanted it laid out. The kid, I say he's a kid, he's not a kid, but he's literally a genius, I think. He's very, very smart. He understands the mechanical, he understands the whole system all the way around. He's gone into big distilleries, he's followed them around, he went to the school, he's sharp, and he does a great job for us. He's helped work with Tommy and Nick Klee and help them along. So we have 3 people that can really do what we want to in there, but Caleb is he's the lead pony there. So
Is he like another son to you? Part of the family?
He really is. Yeah, no, he is. And and I feel like a lot of them in there, we're basically a big family. We only have about 20 employees. Maybe we got a few part-time that are work in the retail part of it, but most we'll have is 22 employees in there, so we're always going to be that size distillery.
Mm-hmm. So before we kind of wrap things up, I know that I kind of want to touch back on the history of you and your military background, because I know you have a tie to General Patton as well. Is that correct?
My father was General Patton's chief aide. So if you saw the movie Patton, the man that was right with General Patton in real life was my father. I've got General Patton's gun that he carried all through the war. If you saw the movie Patton, he said pearls were for women and ivories for men. I've got the gun, the ivory handle 45 that was his shoulder harness. So my father owned it for 30 years. He passed away young of a heart attack. I've owned this gun for 43 years. My sons will own it. My grandsons, they'll own it. So the gun that General Patton carried all through the war will never leave the Taylor family.
And then, so you also have, like I mentioned, that military tie. When military officers or personnel come through the distillery, I think you've had a few of those kind of moments as well with some of those individuals. Have you not?
Oh yeah, they do. Because if you go down to the Patton Museum down in Fort Knox, there's a picture, about a 10-foot tall picture of General Patton. That's my father standing right next to him. So all the Army generals, McCaffrey just retired, a 2-star general. He wanted to have his retirement dinner at our distillery. He brought 8 of the top Army generals in the United States Army were in our distillery that night. So he wants us to bring the gun in so people can see the generals in the Army and the colonels. If there's a general or a colonel down at Fort Knox or somebody visiting from Leavenworth or from other places, they come see me, and they want to know the history about my father, and which is a pretty interesting history.
Pretty cool.
I mean, the story that everybody likes to hear is when my father sent me to military school down at Castle Heights, and my 2 roommates were the Allman brothers. So Greg and Dwayne.
Oh, that's right. I remember this story.
Were my roommates down at military school, and it was a wild damn time. I'll tell you that.
Sure.
So we had
every time I've listened to Allman Brothers, it's a wild time.
yeah. So that's to back up just a little bit. You mentioned Freddie. No.
Yeah.
Well, Freddie and I spoke at the convention center one time, and Freddie's father, Booker, sent him to Castle Heights, kind of straighten his rear end out. My dad sent me to Castle Heights, straighten my rear end out.
Well, it didn't work for Fred.
It didn't work for me either. So Freddie, for all these years, he said, the Allman brothers went to Castle Heights. So I'm 70 years old. Freddie's probably 62. So he'd been telling these people that the Allman brothers went to Castle Heights. So we're speaking here at the convention center. I said, Freddie, you didn't know this, but I went to Castle Heights. So you can imagine what he said.
Yeah.
He has no muffler, So
And a few
and I said, and oh, by the way, the Allman brothers were my roommates. Well, he busted a gut on that one. He said, my God. I said, but Freddie, you never saw the Allman brothers. I'm 70, you're like 62. They weren't there. He said, no, they weren't there, by God, but I knew they were there. I said, I know they were too. They were my roommates. So we laughed about that. And so when he does see me, he said, I know you're the Allman brothers' roommate.
That's pretty awesome.
That is
Yeah.
cool.
They didn't initially try to get you to pick up another guitar and start playing with them or anything?
That was when they were 14, 15 years old. They were young. They had a guitar in the room, but they never.
Yeah.
I mean, they might on Sunday afternoon they play the guitar, you'd sing, but I mean, I didn't know what the hell's going on.
They weren't writing Jessica there.
No, they weren't. They weren't. They were.
Rambling Man.
Yeah. So we got in a little trouble. We found out the first day we were there that the girls were at the Dairy Queen on Sunday night. So we come busting out of there to the Dairy Queen Sunday night, come back at 1. Captain's always standing there raising that like we cared. We wanted to get kicked out of this place.
Exactly.
So we
please send me home.
we stayed in trouble.
Yeah.
Give me another one of those good stories. So I mean, you went to go to the Dairy Queen. What other things you try to do to get in trouble there?
Oh, we made a little. We did make some wine in there, so we get drunk every once in a while. But I think the Dairy Queen was.
That's awesome.
That was the wildest. So we had no money. We'd go to the Dairy Queen. I mean, we'd go to the Dairy Queen, end up there at 1 o'clock. We couldn't even buy a Coke. We were so
What's going
broke.
on at the Dairy Queen? More than blizzards.
Yeah, but then I figured out. I said, now here's how we're going to make money. We're going to go down to the drugstore. We're going to buy a little vial of cinnamon. We're going to go in cafeteria, soak these toothpicks, and sell them to all the rich boys for 10 cents a piece. So we sold 10 at breakfast, 10 at lunch, 10 at dinner. That's $3 a day. $21 when we got on Sunday. We have a lot more fun at the Dairy Queen.
Hold on. Why did people want cinnamon sticks?
Oh, they loved them. All the rich boys. They had rich boys down there, man. They had Al Gore went to school. He was one of our roommates for a short period of time. So heck, they'd walk around with these cinnamon toothpicks in their mouth. They loved them. That guy had all the money boys sucking on those toothpicks. And then
I didn't know that was a thing.
yeah. So then when they got ready to, Allman Brothers wrote a book. Then they wrote about that in their book, how I came up with the cinnamon
toothpicks. That's pretty cool.
I know. It's the next big marketing ploy right there.
Yeah. No, we had a good time.
Yeah, when you leave Peerless, get yourself a bottle of whiskey and a cinnamon toothpick. That's the way you should do it. So, Corky, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast. This is a pleasure to not only get to know you and your story, but also more about the product. And now that people are going to know more about it, they're going to be probably more inclined to go out there and try it too. So next time you are at your liquor store, your local package store, at a bar, wherever it is, give it a try. I mean, I'm going to say that I'm a believer now because I have tried Peerless over the past 2 years plus now, and the first time I tried it, I was pretty taken away because I was, this is again a year plus ago, about being a 2-year product. I was like, this is actually pretty fantastic. And now if you can,
I remember it was my birthday. We were sitting at the bar and they gave us samples, and I was like, all right, let's see. Are they full of shit, or is this like, is this really good? And then we took it, and I was like, damn it is good. You're like, and then, but no, I mean, gosh, what we're tasting today is like even better. You know, it's amazing what a year has done to this. Like, gosh, especially that single barrel. I mean, it tastes like a 8 to 10 year old. Like, I mean, the richness and complexity in it. I mean, I don't know what you're doing, but
he told us.
I mean, he won't tell us.
He won't tell us.
Yeah.
Other than going at a lower proof, other than that.
No, we just want people to come down and see our place and see how we make it.
And it is a cool place. I mean, like, it's amazing because when Kenny and we were on my birthday, a friend of mine set up a Heaven Hill tour of the Chavley plant. You go there and they got, I mean, obviously it's a factory over there. Yeah. But then you go to your place and it's great to come see, like, a craft distillery where it's like you feel like it is truly handmade and like everything's legit about, like, it's a cool building and everything about it's like, I don't know, it's refreshing, I guess.
Yeah.
Where are you going with this, right?
Well, I'm just saying I don't know, it's just a nice change of pace from all the other distilleries you go to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we kind of kick it off here, give a shout out to people of where they can find out more about you, where can they locate the distillery, so on and so forth.
Well, we're down on 120 North 10th Street, right past the baseball bat factory, Louisville Slugger with a big baseball. Go another block, take a right towards the river. We're right down the street there. We have tours from starting Monday through Saturday from 10 to 5. We stay open late in the summer till 7 on Thursday and Friday night. But you can get our product in most all the liquor stores, especially in Kentucky, but the big liquor stores and even the smaller ones. And we're getting wider spread in a lot of the restaurants and bars. And so we're, it just takes time. You build a brand, it's going to take us a while to build a brand. So we know that, but we're pretty accessible, in the liquor stores, especially in Kentucky. Well, all over. We're in 45 states, and we're, like Total Wines and the ABCs and the Bevmos and a lot of the Specs and some of the bigger chains in the big states where we are. But no, we're in a lot of liquor stores here in the state of Kentucky, and they support us very well, and we're very appreciative. We know where we're from. We're from Kentucky, so we're
got to play in your own backyard.
You're darn right you do. I mean, we're honored to be here, and we're tickled to death to have people drink our product.
Well, yeah, Corky, I mean, I appreciate I love the history, the bottle, everything about it. I mean, this is, it's cool seeing stuff that's being made in Louisville that's not just from, like you said, the Big Seven, and seeing the success that you guys had. It's really exciting, and I'm excited for what's to come, and I appreciate you taking the time to hang out in our little nook here at Down One Bourbon Bar.
Absolutely. And so thank you once again to Down One Bourbon Bar for inviting us here, having us here. We're just a few blocks away from Peerless Distilling Company, so if you're coming down to visit Peerless, and as well as a lot of the other Louisville bourbon excursions, make sure you stop at Down One, get yourself a drink, and move on to the next place. With that, we'll see everybody next week.
Bourbon and Beyond. The world's biggest music and bourbon festival is even bigger. September 20th, 21st, and 22nd at Highland Festival Grounds at the Kentucky Expo in Louisville with Foo Fighters, Zach Brown Band, Robert Plant, and the sensational Space Shifters. Gerald Hall and John Oates, John Fogerty, ZZ Top, Leon Bridges, and more. Complete lineup of musical artists and celebrity chefs at bourbonandbeyond.com.